Welcome to Swayam online portal for the program Public Administration and which is Public Financial Administration. This Swayam online course specially for Public Financial Administration focuses on the different aspects of finance with respect to public administration. In today's module, dear students, we will be discussing on what budgeting is. Now, what are the organs involved in the formulation of budgeting? The government budget gets approved through an amalgamation of a group of members. It's a consultative process. Consultation happens. It involves the Ministry of Finance. We know that the Ministry of Finance as a sole, I would say, is an important aspect as far as the budget is concerned, because all the gathering of information happens at this single point as the Ministry of Finance. We also have the Niti Aayog, which is not a constitutional body. It has been framed as a body to actually advise the process of budgeting and also for the performance of the programs. Now, if you see, the smart city and various other programs came under the umbrella of the Niti Aayog, which is very transformative and also very progressive in its approach. And of course, all the ministries are responsible and answerable to the Ministry of Finance for preparation of the budget. The budget has to be approved. So, it has to go through the Ministry of Finance, and then for every ministry, for every department, it has to go to the Ministry of Finance, and then it will be placed in front of the legislature. The legislature will pass the budget, and after that only the expenditure can be incurred or the revenue can be collected. The budget division of the Department of Economic Affairs under the Ministry of Finance is the nodal body for preparing the budget. So, we have a specific Department of Economic Affairs just focusing on the budgetary aspect as far as the Government of India is concerned. Now, what are the stages or the process as far as budget is concerned? The first point is the preparation of the estimate by drawing and disbursing officer. Okay? So, first is a drawing and a disbursing officer should be present, so that you know what the estimate of the expenditure is concerned. Now, if you are planning, say, for a trip to a particular place, say Darjeeling, you will always plan what will be the budget before even planning to book the train tickets or the flight tickets. So, planning also plays an important role, but at the same time an estimate is important, that how much will be the expenditure so that you can afford that expenditure. Similarly, there is a disbursing officer for preparation of the estimate, so that for that financial year they can afford the expenditure which could be incurred. Next, you have the scrutiny and the consolidation of estimates by the department and the ministry. All the ministries will need to be scrutinized as far as the budget is concerned, whether the expenditure which they have asked or the capital which is required can be justified by every department. The scrutiny by the finance ministry itself is an important aspect, because they need to check whether these expenses are really genuine or really required, or it is a priority as far as the Indian governance is concerned. And also there need to be a settlement of disputes, because sometimes it could go overboard, the expenditure. So, how it can be justified, and the consolidation by the finance ministry with the approval of the cabinet is the final stage as far as the stages and process is concerned. So, you see that the budgeting process does not happen by one man or one person. It happens by a group of people. The ministries are involved, the departments are involved, the administrative agencies are involved. The Ministry of Finance plays a key and vital role as far as the budgeting process is concerned. What are the charged expenditure? The budget consists of two types of expenditure. So, we need to now focus on charged expenditure. Now, the expenditure charged is upon the consolidated fund of India. Another expenditure is made from the consolidated fund of India, which is not very agonizing, but the charge is something which needs to be discussed. The charge expenditure is non-votable by the parliament, that it can only discuss in the parliament, but it cannot be put into vote. It cannot decide, it can only discuss the purpose of the expenditure. The list of charge expenditure is as follows. One is the emoluments and allowances of the president and other expenditures relating to his office. The president is given special purpose, and hence the expenditure that is involved in the president's office also is considered important, and it is taken in from the consolidated fund of India. And also the salaries and the emoluments involved for the chairman and the deputy is also looked into, of the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha will be considered. The Speaker of the Lok Sabha is also given special prerogative, and it is charged expenditure as far as the budgeting is concerned, and it comes from the consolidated fund of India. And the salaries, allowance and the pensions of the judges of the Supreme Court is also coming from the consolidated fund of India, and the pensions of the judges of the High Court is also coming from the consolidated fund of India. So, charge expenditure is something which needs to be always under consideration, despite the other expenditure, which is a made expenditure, which can be debated in the parliament, but the charge expenditure cannot be debated. It can be debated, but it cannot be cut. Now, what are the constitutional provisions? We have some important constitutional provisions. We know that Article 1112 is very important because it mentions the annual financial statement. But we have the rest of the other provisions which are also equally important, which will be discussed in this slide. Now, what is Article 1112? It is Article 112. The President shall, in respect of every financial year, lay before both the houses of the parliament, which is the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, a statement of estimated receipts and expenditure of the government of India for that particular year. This is known as the annual financial statement. So, remember that the Article 112 or the Article 112 is presented by the President. The parliament comprises of the President, the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. Okay. So, it has to be presented by the President to the both houses, and then it is presented as the annual financial statement. Article 113 or the Article 113 speaks about no demand for a grant that shall be made except on the recommendation of the President. Okay. So, nothing goes beyond the President. The President has supreme power. So, Article 112 and 113 are interconnected. Article 112 or 112 speaks about the annual financial statement, and again it is presented by the President, and Article 113 is about how it cannot be trespassed by the President itself. Next, Article 114, it says that no money shall be withdrawn from the consolidated fund of India except under appropriation made by the law. Okay. So, no money shall be withdrawn from the consolidated fund of India without the permission or without consideration of the law. The Constitution is upheld at any given point of time. So, Article 112, 13 and 14, 114 becomes very important. Now, if you see the next important article as far as the budgetary provisions are concerned is Article 117 or 117, which speaks about no money bill imposing tax shall be introduced in the parliament except on the recommendation of the president, which we all know, and such a bill shall not be introduced in the Rajya Sabha. So, this sole proprietary, I would say, would be given to the Lok Sabha. It just cannot come in the Rajya Sabha, because Lok Sabha consists of representatives directly elected by the people in the Lok Sabha, and this prerogative is given to the Lok Sabha. So, you see that Article 117 or 117 emphasizes that any bill pertaining to money cannot come through the Rajya Sabha, and no tax shall be levied or collected except by the authority of law, which comes under Article 265. So, you see how taxation is also coming under the constitution provision, constitution law, where no one can tax without giving proper justification, and it is not passed by the parliament. If the government is saying that someone comes to you and say that the government is asking taxes, then this has to be justified, because it has to be passed in the parliament. So, parliament cannot reduce a tax or abolish a tax, neither cannot increase it. It can reduce. So, I want to repeat, parliament can reduce or abolish a tax, but cannot increase it. So, it can only reduce, but cannot increase. Now, as far as other provisions are concerned, the Constitution has also defined the relative roles or positions of both the House of Parliament. It has given the parameters or the boundary lines as far as the Parliament is concerned, concerning both the houses with regard to the enactment of the budget, or we would say the annual financial statement. That is, first we have already discussed, a money bill or a finance bill dealing with taxation or cannot be introduced in the Rajya Sabha, but can be introduced in the Lok Sabha, should be introduced only in the Lok Sabha. Any finance bill or a money bill can be introduced only in the Lok Sabha, and the Rajya Sabha has no power to vote on the demand for grants. It is exclusive privilege of the Lok Sabha. So, you see, if there is a difference between the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha is very powerful. The lower house of the parliament is very powerful, and its voice can be heard because it is a power for not only demand of grants, but also to vote for money bill or finance bill. The Rajya Sabha should return the money bill to the Lok Sabha within 14 days. It can discuss to a certain level. When the Lok Sabha has passed it and passed to the Rajya Sabha, then the Rajya Sabha should pass it after 14 days. It cannot hold beyond 14 days, and the Lok Sabha can either accept or reject the recommendation given by the Rajya Sabha. So, as far as the money bill or finance bill is concerned, it is very important to see that the Lok Sabha is more powerful for passing the money bill or the finance bill. The estimates of expenditures embodied in the budget shall show separately the expenditures charged on the consolidated fund of India. So, you know how it is segregated, it is clearly demarcated and separated. The budget shall distinguish the expenditure on revenue account from the other expenditure. So, it should distinguish what is the revenue account, what is the income, what is the expenditure, and the expenditure, other expenditures miscellaneous should also be separated as per the article 112. And as far as article 113 is concerned, the expenditure charged on the consolidated fund of India should not be submitted to the vote of parliament. Okay? And anything to do, we already discussed that the charged expenditures from the consolidated fund of India, like the emoluments of the judges or the President of India or the other expenditures of the Lok Sabha or the chairperson or the deputy chairperson or the speaker of the Lok Sabha, cannot be put to vote. okay, by the Parliament. It goes directly from the Consolidated Fund of India. Of course, they can discuss about it. Now, what is the enactment of the budget? Now, the enactment of the budget means it is a passage or approval of the budget. Enactment, to enact, to pass. Now, when the 73rd and the 74th Amendment started, it was just started as a proposition and it was started as a bill, but it becomes an act only when it is passed by the Parliament. So, enactment of the budget means passage or approval of the budget, that is annual financial statement by Parliament and ratification by the President. So, here the key person for this passing of the budget also is the President. And you see that it has to be passed by the Parliament, at the same time the approval is given for enactment by the President. This legalizes the receipts, the expenditures of the government, and hence it becomes an act, an enactment that can be passed and followed by the legislature, by the executives. This implies the government can neither collect money nor spend without the enactment of the budget. So, unless it is passed in the Parliament, approved by the signatory authority of the President, it cannot be an enactment of the budget. It cannot be passed by any other government at all. So, when you take the stages in the enactment, first it is not an easy task. I would say it would be presentation of the budget. You see the Ministry of Finance headed by the minister will come, the finance minister will come and present the budget. So, first is the presentation of the budget to the world, to the country, that this is the budget which has been placed for the entire annual year or on the annual basis for the entire financial year, and presented to the Parliament and present to the people of the country, so that they know what the budget is all about. Then after a few days they have the general discussion. After discussion, it will be scrutinized by the department to see the validity of the proposal or the validity of the proposed budget by the Ministry of Finance. Then the voting on the demand for grants happen if there is some other extra expenditure for the welfare of the needs. You know that India has moved from a police state to a welfare state. So, expenditure happen for the welfare programs, especially in the fronts of expenditure, in the fronts of health, education, and also welfare of the needs of the people, basic amenities like water and other facilities. And also the passing of the appropriation bill, and finally the passing of the finance bill, and the main sole strength is left on the Lok Sabha, the lower house of the Parliament, which is the Lok Sabha. Now, what are the stages? We will go one after the other. It is the presentation of the budget. We know that the presentation of the budget will be with the budget speech. Then you have the annual financial statement, which will be presented in detail. Then you have the demand for grants, then the appropriation bill and the finance bill. Then the statement will come under the FRBM, which is the financial aspects, which also focuses on the budget, on the physical policies, of the budget, the macroeconomic framework statement, the physical policy strategies, and also the medium term physical policy statement. So, the FRBM Act has become very important as far as the finance is concerned, because the physical rates will focus on how to improve the system. And now we are following the FRBM Act of 2003 on how to reduce the physical interest rates to 3%, so that the GDP can be improved, so that the gross domestic product can be improved, and also we have quality products. So, this plays a very important role as far as budgeting is concerned. And finally, you have the expenditure of the budget, which will be presented. There are also the receipts budget and then expenditure profile, memorandum explaining the provisions of the finance bill, and also budget at a glance, a shorter version, abridged version, and the outcome of the budget, what is expected from the budget. So, earlier what happens is the economic survey used to present it to the parliament so that they have an overview of the budget. Now, it is presented one or a few days earlier before the finance ministry could present the budget, and this report is prepared actually by the finance minister, so that finance ministry, so that they have an idea, the president will have an idea of what is going to be presented in the form of a budget. And this also will help in actually foreseeing or forecasting the national economy as far as India is concerned. So, the general discussion on budget begins a few days after the presentation, and it takes place in both the houses of the parliament and lasts only for say 3 or 4 days. And during this stage, the Lok Sabha can discuss any aspect, any questions or principles which is required, which is of concern to the needs of people. If there is taxation which is increased, which will be for petrol tax or a tax for some products, construction items, then it would be a burden to the system, and that is why it will be discussed in detail. And now what happens is it can be the budget can be submitted to the vote of the House. The finance ministry can also have a right to reply at the end of the discussion. So, it was two ways. Once the discussion is done with the opposition, it can also be discussed or replied, or it can be responded suitably for clarification by the Ministry of Finance, by the finance minister. Now, the scrutiny, after which the scrutiny of the department happens, the department committees will look into this budget which has been submitted, and it is very crucial, because after the general discussion on the budget, it is adjourned for few days, it will be set aside for few days, and during this gap, say the 24 departmental standing committees of the parliament will examine and discuss in detail every detail of the demand for grants of the concerned minister. So, you know that auditing does not happen just only after the financial statement is given, but also auditing happens during the budget, after it is presented, after it is discussed, and the standing committees and the parliamentary committees plays a very important role in discussing the finances and see that everything is appropriate to the right concern topics. And it is then submitted to both the houses of the parliament for consideration if there is any correction. And the standing committees, which was established in 1993, makes parliamentary financial control over ministries which more comprehensive detail, so that it acts like a checks and balances. So, the auditor is only not checking, but it is also the standing committee which act as a check and balance for the legislature, so that the budget is adequately funded and also the expenses are rightly used for. Now, if you see the voting on demands for grants, they are presented ministry wise, and demand becomes a grant because it has been voted. So, after it is voted, the voting of demand of grants is exclusive privilege of the Lok Sabha and not for the Rajya Sabha. So, as far as the demand for grants is concerned, it is an exclusive right given to the Lok Sabha for passing the demand for grants. And also the voting is confined to the votable part of the budget, but the expenditure charged on the consolidated fund cannot be touched. Now, there can be cut motions. Okay? Cut motions are what? To reduce the demand on grants. Policy cut motion, economic cut motion, and also token cut motion. Now, cut motion is demand, reducing the demand for grants. Policy cut motion, at the most it can reduce to 1 rupee, and economy cut motion, it can be reduced to a specific amount, but finally you have the token portion which can be reduced to rupees 100. Now, you can see that the passing of the appropriation bill, when you have to pass the appropriation bill, it has to be introduced to provide for the appropriation first out of the Consolidated Fund of India, then the grants will be again voted by the Lok Sabha, as we clearly know that the Lok Sabha will pass any votes regarding the finance bill and the money bill, and the expenditure will be charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, and no such amendment can be proposed to the appropriation bill in either house of the parliament that shall have effect of varying the amount or altering. It cannot change the amount. Whatever is given will only be discussed. The grant will only provide whatever is asked, and they cannot manipulate, or no kind of altering can take place, and only the expenditure will be charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, and the appropriation bill becomes an appropriation act after it is assented by the President. Once the President signs, it becomes an appropriation bill, and this act again comes from the Consolidated Fund of India. What is passing of the finance bill? The finance bill is introduced with the financial proposals for the Government of India for the following year. It is subjected to all kinds which is applicable as a money bill. Unlike the appropriation bill, the amendments seeking to reject or reduce a tax can be moved in case of a finance bill. So, here it is unlike an appropriation bill where there is limitation, but here they can actually remove or say that it is not a necessity or it can be procrastinated, then it can seek for rejection or reduce a tax. So, according to the provincial collection of taxes, provisional collection of taxes of 1931, according to the provision collection of taxes of 1931, the finance bill must be enacted, passed by the parliament, and of course assented by the President within 75 days. It has to be passed within 75 days, and the Finance Act legalizes the income side of the budget and completes the process of the enactment of the budget. The entire process of the enactment of the budget is passed when the finance bill is assented by the President himself. Now, what are the other grants? The other grants, there are some of the exceptional grants, which is the supplementary grant, the additional grant, the excess grant, the vote of credit, exceptional grant, the token grant, and demand for the grant. You can see that in addition to the budget, these grants are also available for based on the estimates of the income and the expenditure of one financial year, and the other grants are made by the parliament under extraordinary circumstances. So, if you see that the supplementary grant is talking about how the amount authorized by the parliament through the Appropriation Act by a particular service of the current financial year is found to be insufficient for that year. So, that is called supplementary grant, to add on. Now, additional grant is also something similar to the supplementary grant, which speaks about the current financial year for additional expenditure upon some new services or contemplated services which will enhance some purpose or programs. An excess grant on the other case is granted which has been spent on any services during a financial year in excess to the what amount which has been given for some kind of services in the budget. So, this is known as excess grant, and the vote of credit is a grant. It is granted for meeting an unexpected demand upon the resources of India, unexpected. Okay. Suppose there is a calamity and you know there is a need for voters grant. So, this is where a vote of credit is given, and you have an exceptional grant for a special purpose and forms no part of current service, but it is an exceptional grant. And a token grant is granted when funds to meet the proposed expenditure on a new service that can be available by reappropriation. So, a reappropriation amount is actually significantly there in the budget. So, this is coming in the form of a token grant, and the demand for the grant of a token sum is ₹1 is submitted to the vote of the Lok Sabha, and if assented, the funds are made available. Okay. So, we saw the other grants, which are the supplementary, which is also the additional grants, the excess grant, the token grants, the vote of credit, exceptional grants, and finally, a demand for grant for just ₹1. It is presented to the Lok Sabha, and then the funds are made available if it is passed by the Lok Sabha. What are the funds of the Consolidated Fund of India, which comes under the Article 266? It is a fund which all the receipts are credited. All the receipts are credited and all payments are debited. Payments to some as salaries are debited and receipts are all credited. And in other words, all the revenues received by the Government of India, whatever money is going to the Consolidated Fund of India, all loans raised by the government by the issue of treasury bills, loans or ways are also in the means of advances are given to the the Government of India. And also all money received by the government in repayment of loans, we have a huge public debt as far as India is concerned. It cannot be repaid so easily, but some amount will be repaid from the Consolidated Fund of India. And also all the legally authorized payments on behalf of the Government of India are made out of this fund, and no money of this fund can be appropriated. Okay? No money of this fund can be appropriated except for what purpose it is given in accordance with the parliamentary law. So, you see that the Consolidated Fund is used for a purpose as far as the Government of India is concerned, and it comes under the Article 265. So, if you see as a budget, apart from Article 112, 113, 117, you see that Article 265 and 266 also plays an important role. The 266 article speaks about the public accounts of India. That is, all public money other than that credited from the Consolidated Fund of India received on behalf of the Government of India shall be credited to the public account of India, and this includes Provident Fund, fund deposits, judicial deposit, savings bank deposits, and also departmental deposit remittance. Okay. Anything to do other than the Consolidated Fund of India, it is coming into the public accounts of India, which comes under the Article 266. And this account is operated by the Executive Union. That is, the payments from this account can be made without parliamentary appropriation. Okay. So, you see that this does not require parliamentary appropriation. Such payment are mostly in the nature of bank transaction. So, there is proof for it, there is receipts for it, bank transaction happens. So, this is an executive action and it happens by a bank transaction. And you see finally, you have the Contingency Fund of India. So, Consolidated Fund in India is usually given as in the form of salaries, and if you see Public Accounts Committee will be acting as deposits from judicial deposits or Provident Fund deposits from the government employees. But the Contingency Fund of India, which is another important article as far as the finance is concerned, is the Article 267, and 267 is Contingency Fund of India. The Constitution authorized the Parliament to establish a Contingency Fund of India, which amounts by law to be paid from time to time. According to the Parliament enacted, the Contingency Fund was initiated in the year 1950. Why is the contingency important? It is at the disposal of the President. Okay, in case of an emergency, to make some expenses to see if there is any emergency, to see if there is any advances that has to be made, then this contingency plays a very important role. You can also see that the fund is held by the finance secretary on behalf of the president, and hence like the public accounts of India, it is also operated by an executive action. And only you see the consolidated fund of India does not happen by a executive action. Now, finally, we come to an important aspect that we have concluded how the stages of budgeting happens, and especially when the Indian budgeting system is concerned. You see that the budget is a principal policy document. It is an annual financial statement saying that whatever the expenditures is, whatever the income is, so that the Indian system is strengthened by its national economy. A country is stabilized or destabilized depending on the allocation of funds, and so the budget plays an important role. We might give many theories, many responsible answers of making a budget, but the government of India plays a very important role, and also the departments and the ministries of various other aspects should consider that budgeting plays an important role, a primary role for stabilizing a nation. If India is stable, it is not only for its social policy or a social democratic policy, but also with its strong economic policy. We see how the liberalization has opened up the market. We see how India is able to balance the state versus market economy, and so it plays a very important role. You also notice that the budget is very transparent because it has been presented to the parliament, the lawmakers, and also the rule makers, and to the people of India. So, the Ministry of Finance is not only acknowledging the people of India, but also the people who are paying the tax, and therefore, it becomes a core and important aspect as far as good governance agenda is concerned. I would also like to conclude that the government has many good practices as far as budgeting is concerned, and I think it only emulates that how strong India is. When you talk about good governance, we talk about the good budgetary processes. You see that the budgetary process as far as India is concerned is very stable. Despite the fall of many economies, we were able to stabilize because of our intellectual strength, our academic strength, are also economists who are able to foresee, forecast, and also we have the non-statutory constitutional bodies like the Planning Commission, which was then changed to the Niti Aayog, which transformed the vision of India, of becoming India a strong world economy, competitive economy, so that we can be more globalized and also be localized at the same time, strengthening our rural economy and also promoting entrepreneurship, skill development, so that our budgetary system can be enhanced, empowered. And I think this shows that a country's reflection by a good budgetary process. The budgetary process has to be strong and has to be enabled so that any enactments through the budgetary process will actually focus on the development of a country. Thank you.